Good morning. It's August 29th, 2012 at 9 o'clock in the morning, and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board is now in session. Ms. Rowe, are there any public comments? Item 3, adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of July 25th, 2012. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 4, consider and take appropriate action with respect to the defeasance of approximately $1.2 million of Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority pass-through toll transportation revenue bonds, Statesboro 601, Series 2008. Mr. Tejas? Mr. Braden, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Paul Braden with Fulbright and George Bond Counsel of the RMA. This agenda item, the resolutions to back up, is a defeasance of your outstanding $1.295 million of your outstanding Spur 601 bonds. As you may recall, when we structured this transaction, there were a couple of maturities on the back end that had early calls. So as more revenue is generated from this project, you're able to pay down your debt sooner. And so this is a periodic call that we're going to make every so often because the monies coming in are more than what's needed to pay on the debt. And actually, as you pay down your debt, that becomes a bigger amount. So the fact that we did this last year and you paid down a significant chunk, so then that meant there was more money coming in from the revenue stream to pay down your debt again. And so this is what we're doing there. And it should be continuing to happen hopefully throughout the remaining life of this project, so that you'll be able to pay off the debt early and therefore free up revenues on the back end to be used in accordance with the documents. The amount, as I mentioned, that's being called is $1,295,000, and you're calling that on October 1st, so it'd be redeemed as of October 1st. And what's being called is that principal amount plus interest to that date. That's what's being paid to the bondholders. And what this resolution does is basically give instruction to the trustee to proceed forward with notice and call those bonds, and it gives Raymond's instructions to work with the trustee to get that done by October 1st.
Great. Any questions?
No questions.
And from what I understand, the revenue that's coming in off the pass-through tolls obviously exceed the debt, so we're going to be on a regular basis, per what you said, every 2 years, within a certain specified amount of time, to be able to do the same thing at periodic points throughout the life of the debt.
Exactly, from now forward, and the sooner you can pay it down, the better. So we'll do it as soon as reasonable it makes sense. Maybe it wouldn't make sense if you only have $5,000 in the account, but if you have tens of thousands of dollars, it'll make sense to call the bonds as soon as you can. And
it was $28 million that was paid down last year. Is that correct?
I think that's right. 26 or 28. So that allowed a bigger amount to be freed up now. Raymond probably knows the exact amount.
It was $28,400,000 last year.
So it's done a good job. Has that shortened the amortization schedule, or are we still on track with the current amortization schedule?
It actually has. I think this final payment pays off one of those two maturities, the maturities on the back end. So what happened is that paid off most of the last maturity, and then, and I can tell you which one it is, and then this defeasance will pay off the rest of that maturity, and then I think you still have like a $20 million or so maturity that we're now chipping away at with all the other payments.
Great. And there's action in regards to this particular item, Mr. Tejas?
Yes, sir. The action is the board resolution that was presented in the packet.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion 4 is approved, or item 4 is approved. Item 5, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to take the following actions as they relate to the I-10 at Loop 375 Americus Interchange project. A, execute amendment number 2 to a project development agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation dated March 22nd, 2012 for design of the final 2 direct connectors, cloverleaf improvements, and frontage road work. And B, issue payment to the El Paso Electric Company for the relocation of a distribution line in the total amount of $6,789.34. Mr. Tejas?
By way of background, if you may recall that we signed a project development agreement with TxDOT back in March of 2012, and the point of that project development agreement was really to allow the RMA to do the design work necessary for the westbound to southbound direct connector. Through that project development agreement, the RMA was granted up to $2 million to develop the design work. And the intent behind that was to expedite the completion of the design so that TxDOT could let and construct the projects quicker. So we signed that original project development agreement back in March. Then we came back in June with a first amendment to that project development agreement to add the design work necessary for the completion of the eastbound to southbound, and that added an additional $750,000. So again, the point was that we needed to get the design work done very quickly. TxDOT asked us to complete the design so that they could let and construct these projects, these two additional direct connectors. What we have before us today then is a second amendment, which is intending to allow the RMA to complete the design, really, in essence, the design work necessary for the ultimate schematic that has originally been put out for the Americas interchange. So what that really consists of is not only completing the design for the westbound to southbound, but the eastbound to southbound, and now we're adding to that, through the second amendment, the southbound to eastbound, the northbound to eastbound, the various work related to the clover leaves and frontage roads as well. So it's, in essence, when you now look at the Americas interchange schematic, which is the ultimate design, we will have provided the design for everything else. So that's really what this second amendment does. In doing so, it adds an amount of just shy of $4.26 million. And actually, that one of the items that we'll need to do here from the floor is make an amendment to the project development agreement that's included in your packet to make note that the total amount, which is the original $2 million from the original PDA plus the $750,000 from the first amendment, adding this $4.26 million combined collectively is $7.01 million. The amendment that I'm asking for from the floor is that it would be a not to exceed amount of $7.01 million, as opposed to the way that it's currently written, which essentially says that the RMA would have access to 7.01. Again, just a technical issue, but TxDOT has requested it, and I think we're okay with it. So again, in essence, what we're doing here is a second amendment to that original PDA to basically complete the design work for all of the remaining items necessary for the Americas interchange.
Super. Any questions? And this, as Raymond mentioned, actually brings the ultimate configuration of the 8 direct connectors. So it'll, it's already very impressive now with just the 3 that are on track for the substantial completion, perhaps even a tad early. So then with the other 3 and these final 2 will be the 8 and the east side spaghetti bowl will really take shape. So with that, is there a motion from the floor to add in to item A, the not to exceed $7.01 million?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The item is amended as stated. With that, is there a motion from the floor to accept, to execute amendment number 2?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Approved. 5B, issue payment to the El Paso Electric Company for the relocation of a distribution line in the total amount of $6,789.34. Mr. Tejas?
This item, you'll recognize that we've done this before where we had to relocate a telecommunications line for the Americas Interchange project. Essentially what we're doing here under item 5B is requesting authorization to pay the electric company $6,789.34 to allow us to relocate an overhead distribution line that's currently in the way of the future westbound to northbound direct connector. So the reason why we rolled it into this particular project is that it actually, we've got the existing utility agreements in place, so it actually saves a great deal of money to do this one last relocation within this project, as opposed to rolling it into the next project for the westbound to northbound direct connector. So I'm asking for approval of 5B.
Who caught that and determined that we could move that now at kind of a significant upfront savings as opposed to later on when the additional direct connectors are coming on board?
Actually, this is one of the items, if you'll recall that periodically our general engineering consultant, we've got a list of additional items that we could do to the interchange should additional funding become available. This was included in that list.
Well, that was a good catch, because as I understand, it would have been significantly more money to do this later on down the road, so.
Okay. Is this the only move of utilities for the entire project, or will this be repeated again as the other connectors come into play?
This is the only one necessary for the westbound to northbound. Now, we believe, and we're going to continue to review this, but we believe when the other direct connectors come online, they may require their own relocations, but that would be a specific question as to whether or not we roll it into our project or we leave it for that future project.
And the cost will be burdened who, us, or?
Well, that's the question. So I guess the other way to say that is the Americas Interchange project that we're developing has a certain fund balance. The question is, when the next project comes online, which currently TxDOT is looking to let the next 3 direct connectors in the coming months, if there are any relocations left in those 3, does it make more sense economically for us to shoulder that or leave it in that project? And we'll continue to review those. But for this particular project, it made sense because the cost savings was so great for us to do it.
Yeah.
Approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? 5B is approved. Item 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a supplement to work authorization number 13 with Atkins North America as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant for design of the Spur 1966 project, Schuster Connection. Mr. Tejas.
You may recall that several months back, we entered into a project development agreement with TxDOT that basically directed us to complete the design work necessary for what at that time was called the Schuster Connection. That Schuster Connection is now referred to as State Spur 1966. That project development agreement was entered into at a time when TxDOT was still developing the environmental and the preliminary engineering, the schematic phase of that project. So at that time, we tasked our general engineering consultant with work authorization number 13. And the point of that work authorization was really to have our general engineering consultant participate with TxDOT as TxDOT developed its schematic and environmental phases. So it was that original number 13 was not intended to actually complete the design work because TxDOT wasn't far enough along in the process, the environmental and schematic phases. TxDOT has progressed, so we're now at the stage where our general engineering consultant is ready to begin the design phase. So what you see before you here as item number 6 is really work authorization number 13.1 in essence. It's really a supplement to work authorization number 13 that brings in the actual design scope. So that's what you see before you. The design consists of an estimated not to exceed cost of $2.5 million, which will then be added to the original work authorization 13, which was again to participate in the schematic development, which was $300,000. So we're looking at approximately $2.8 million for the completion of the design.
As I understand it, this is on a rather expedited schedule. This design has to be completed prior to, is it November, December? When does the design need to be completed?
Well, the design needs to be completed very quickly to allow for a letting in January of 2013. So we're on this is another one of those very expedited timeline projects, which is why the RMA was brought in.
Any questions? Is there a move to approve?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 6 is approved. Item 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the interlocal cooperation agreement with the Texas Transportation Institute for the assistance with the CRRMA selection of a systems integrator and maintenance provider for the Loop 375 Cesar Chavez Border Highway Managed Lanes project. Mr. Tejas.
So as you know, we are in the procurement process for an integrator for the Cesar Chavez Managed Lanes project. The integrator is essentially the firm that will design and construct and install and maintain the toll equipment systems. So those are the cameras, the readers, and all of the equipment that's necessary to collect all of that information. We're in that procurement now. What's anticipated for that particular procurement is an evaluation team that will evaluate the proposals that come in. That team consists of the operations manager for Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, the operations manager for North Texas Tollway Authority, and also one individual from the Texas Transportation Institute. So what you see before you as item number 7 is a request to amend the existing contract that the RMA has with the Texas Transportation Institute to allow for this one task to be added. And I should back up. Back in 2009, the Texas Transportation Institute entered into essentially an evergreen agreement with the Camino Real RMA, which said if in the future the RMA ever needs the services of Texas Transportation Institute, we would execute an amendment to the original agreement, identifying the task, identifying the not-to-exceed amount, and identifying all of the particulars of that specific task that's being requested. So what you see before you today is the very first task that we are asking of TTI, and that is to serve on the evaluation committee for the Chavez Integrator procurement.
And that is a not to exceed $10,000, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Tess?
That's correct. It's $10,746. That allows for up to 80 hours of time from the Transportation Institute individual. We believe that's high, but the reason that we structured it so high was that we have no idea how many proposals will actually be submitted. So we wanted to build in a cushion in case there are a significant number of proposals. Now, of course, if there's only one or if there's only two, then that will drop his hour usage significantly. So it's a not to exceed amount.
Raymond, what's the timeline for this to happen? The RFP's already out on the street, is that correct?
Yes, sir. And we've begun the one-on-ones. And
When is the deadline to submit proposals?
September, and I'm gonna.
That's fine.
I'll get back to you, but it's early September for the actual submittals.
How long does this panel have to review those and come back with a recommendation?
If you don't mind, rather than guess, if you don't mind, I'll send it to the board. In fact, I'll post something on the website as well. So, and it's included. It's actually on the website right now,
Okay.
so we can find it there. There's a schedule included within the request for proposals.
I wanted it on the record, that's what I was asking, so, but that's okay. Just so we can make sure, since, if somebody's watching, they can see it. The other question is, are they coordinating with the city of El Paso regarding their toll? They're going to bring in also a new software package, I believe, for their tolls, right, at the bridges.
The city of El Paso has discussed that, and we have discussed that specifically with them. In fact, we are talking to the city of El Paso Bridges Director about a visit down to Cameron County to see how Cameron County, actually in South Texas, they've got Cameron County Regional Mobility Authority. The county also manages their international bridges. So we're talking about a joint visit to talk about how Cameron County is operating the two systems and whether or not they work together. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. We have been discussing that with Said.
Right.
At the city, the bridges. Yes, sir.
So, it'd be nice if pending, there's been talk about the RMA assuming some responsibility for the ports of entry, so it'd be nice if there were one system instead of two separate distinct systems.
Absolutely, and we've kept the bridges division apprised of where this procurement is, what we're looking for. In fact, we met with them very early on about this very specific project to tell them what we were doing and how we could have some sort of a shared system should they be interested. So that's been part of our conversation since the beginning.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve item 7? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 7 is approved. Item 8, discussion and action on a board resolution to identify a short list from statements of qualifications received in response to the CRRMA's request for qualifications to provide environmental and preliminary engineering services for the Loop 375 America's Managed Lanes project. Mr. Tejas.
I'll ask IT to bring up, there it is. I'm not sure if it's on. I'll ask IT to bring up item number 8. There we go. So what you see on the screens.
Hold on. I'm not quite there yet.
We don't have it yet right now.
I've got a hard copy, I believe.
Can you draw pictures for us?
I can walk you through it. Actually, the majority of this information is included in your backup.
Is it in the attachment?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In essence, what the public sees is a summary sheet of the Americas.
Do you have it?
I wanted the attachment since most of the product is there, so just open up your attachment, we'll be okay.
As we discussed, we're moving to
A paperless.
paperless system, so we're still working out a couple of the kinks.
This is the,
There should be a second screen available to you. IT is going to...
Have home,
Where it says screen stream on the left.
where?
That one there?
Open it. Screen stream on the left.
Got it.
Fabulous. I just learned something new today.
Screen stream.
Thank you. Okay, so now what everyone sees before you is a summary sheet. To go back in time, the RMA issued a request for qualifications. We're in the middle of a procurement, actually, for the Americas Managed Lanes project. And what we're looking for is a firm that can complete the environmental and preliminary engineering phases for the Americas Managed Lanes, which is, as we know, the connection from Cesar Chavez at Zaragoza Port of Entry up to somewhere around the Americas interchange. So we're looking for someone to develop essentially through the schematic phase, completion of the environmental and the preliminary engineering. That procurement was put out on the street on July 11th. We received, and that, as we are seeking professional services, we issued a request for qualifications. That first phase then, the response to the request for qualifications is referred to as statements of qualifications. We received 5. We received one from AMEC, one from Brown & Gay Engineers, one from Hewitt Zollers, Inc., one from Parkhill Smith & Cooper, and one from URS Corporation. The RMA utilized a selection committee for this process that included an individual from the Central Texas RMA, the engineering manager. We also included the El Paso County Public Works Director, as well as the City of El Paso's assistant engineer, city engineer rather. That selection committee met this past Monday and evaluated the statements of qualifications. The criteria that they used was included within the request for qualifications and included specifically the scores that you see on this sheet, which included points for project manager experience, key staff experience, team organization and staffing, knowledge of local and regional setting, references and past performance, as well as DBE utilization. So those scores were developed Monday evening, in fact. Yes, sir.
What's DBE?
Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, I believe.
Thank you. I just went blank. Thank you. Disadvantaged Business Enterprises. So the evaluation committee met Monday, August 27th, and developed a recommendation that we shortlist 3 firms to move on to the next phase, the second step of the procurement, which is the request for proposals. The recommended shortlist teams would include Brown & Gay Engineers, Hewitt Zollers, Inc., and Parkhill Smith & Cooper. Subject to your questions, that's the recommendation of the evaluation committee, and that's the recommendation that I'm presenting to you today.
Any questions?
Are these all, I'm familiar with Parkhill, Cooper, Smith, but I'm not sure about the others. Are they local or?
Each of the firms have local offices, but in terms of where they're based, Parkhill Smith & Cooper is actually based in Lubbock. Hewitt Zollers is, I'm not actually sure where Hewitt Zollers or Brown & Gay are based, but they each have local offices. Parkhill Smith & Cooper, in fact, has been here for many, many years.
Okay.
And in fact, if you note the materials that were provided to you in the backup, we also broke out the firms that submitted by the sub-consultants that they're utilizing. And you'll note in that backup, 15 out of the 21 firms that comprise the 5 teams are local to the El Paso area for a total local participation exceeding 70%. So we had really high turnout for local participation in this particular procurement.
Who developed the weighting factors, like 35, 25, 15, 10, and so on? Was it just arbitrary, or are they national guidelines, or what criteria was used?
This criteria was developed by me through the comments that were generated very recently through the local engineering firms. And the comments that I've heard to date have actually been very positive from the locals, but I'm assuming that there are some locals here and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that they were very comfortable with the scoring breakout.
So is this, are these weights something we can use going forward, or are these going to be changed arbitrarily as we put out a new procurement?
These will likely be the scores going forward. However, I'd be hesitant to say that these will be the ones that will be used for every project, because some projects may require, depending upon what services are being requested, you may want to keep that flexibility.
Okay.
And in fact, we'll talk about that a little bit later in one of the procurement items that comes up.
Okay, so the DBE seems to be a little bit low, considering we're so focused on getting local engagement. And to give it a 5% seems a little incongruous.
Okay.
I believe the DBE requirement, and, Mr. Tejas and I discussed this, on this particular project, it's set by the state. Is that correct, Mr. Tejas?
That's correct. In
And
fact,
it's set at
DBE utilization.
6% of the total project cost, and I believe the total project cost is around $1.3 million. What is the number, Mr. Tejas?
1.2 million, I believe, for this one.
So,
Okay, well, that's why I was asking where these numbers came from. So some of these were kind of limited by statute or something.
Well, no. What Mr. McLaughlin is talking about is how do we set the DBE percentage required by our contract? That's set by through coordination with the state of Texas through their Office of Civil Rights through TxDOT. But in terms of what percentage points we can value that at, we have that authority within our own
That's
agency.
in our purview.
Yes, sir.
So basically what we have is we have the 5 statements of qualifications. We have the selection committee has reviewed those and has basically recommended Brown and Gay Engineers, Hewitt Zollers, Park Hill, Smith and Cooper. Is there a motion to approve the short list that was identified?
So move.
Is there a second?
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 8 is approved. Item 9, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a consulting services agreement with Terry Quezada, DBA Quezada Data Management Services through March 2013. Mr. Tejas?
As you know, we entered into an agreement with Ms. Quesada not too long ago to see if we could identify projects within the NPO documents that we could pursue. As part of that, we also asked Ms. Quesada to help us as we began discussions with the County of El Paso, the Town of Horizon City, and Socorro, the City of Socorro, to see if we could develop transportation reinvestment zones to actually pursue very specific projects. Ms. Quesada has been excellent to work with and just really helpful in this process. So that original agreement only ran through the end of our fiscal year, which, as you know, ends this August. So what you see before you under item number 9 is a request to enter into a new agreement with her through the middle of our fiscal year, which actually runs us through March of 2013, and I'm asking that we extend this contract. That'll allow us to get through the creation of the transportation reinvestment zones, as well as develop some additional projects that we're looking at.
What's the hourly rate?
The hourly rate is $90. That's an increase from $60 in the original.
Really?
Yes, sir.
We've also, what's
Any
interesting,
reason why? Are we getting more for it, or?
Well, I guess the way that I would explain it is that 60 was the rate that we started at. It was it was a low rate, and I think we all understood that it was a very low rate. The $90 per hour rate, I'm comfortable with, and I think it's reasonable that we go forward with a $90 rate.
Pay me now, pay me later, is that it?
Well, no, but let me explain it this way. I think that the expertise that Ms. Quesada brings to these specific tasks that we're asking of her they're very unique, and she's got all of that experience, and I think she's very helpful, and I think she's going to continue to be very helpful for us.
I've also reviewed this myself. I felt that we were getting quite the bargain at the original rate, and based on what she's bringing to the table and how she's assisting us, in my personal belief, the $90 an hour rate is fair and reasonable. It's only a contract extension through March 2013. I believe it's also a not to exceed. Is that correct? And what is that total dollar amount? Mr.
The not
Jones?
to exceed is $20,000.
So-
I don't anticipate us getting near that, though, honestly.
So that is in there. We also, and we're going to talk about this a little later, we've got a new board member that was just basically approved yesterday by City Council, and he's got a tremendous amount, Mr. Dominguez has got a tremendous amount of MPO experience on the Transportation Improvement Plan, the MTP, and I believe he will bring a wealth of knowledge to this organization. And so we can evaluate in March going forward kind of where we're at and, go from there in terms of Ms. Quezada and, what she's doing for us and go from there. But I believe it's helpful. I believe it's a reasonable rate based on my review and what I've seen.
The other thing I just found interesting under item 2 for billing, you have no reimbursement for luxury items, alcoholic beverages, or meals in excess of $36 per person per day. So,
Those reimbursed, those per diem, those are only for out of town.
oh, okay.
That's
So
what
she can't drink liquor while she's in El Paso.
That, not if
But
we're
she
paying.
does out of town, that's okay?
Not that we're going to approve or pay for.
I just want to make sure, I just want to be clear, when I see the invoices, what we're approving. Okay. Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 9 is approved. Item 10, discussion and action on the CRRMA's adoption of an expedited procurement process for the selection of professional engineering services. Mr. Davis.
So as we've discussed, there have been a couple of items on this agenda that relate to projects that we've had to expedite at the request of TxDOT, where TxDOT has funding available that has very tight timelines associated with them. What we've had to do in the past is simply go to our general engineering consultant and have them complete the work for us. What we were told at the time from other engineering firms was that they wanted to participate in that process. They wanted to see if there was a way for them to participate in those expedited projects as well. So what you see before you is a proposed process by which the RMA would have an expedited selection process for professional engineers in those very unique instances in which there is a very tight timeline associated with potential design work. This proposal that you see before you has been developed. It was originally developed by the RMA, by me, and then shared with local engineering professional organizations. And we went back and forth several times on various revisions and various modifications. This final version, I believe, has the support of the local professional engineering community, but hopefully we can have them come to the podium and share their comments about this as well. But let me outline what we're looking to do here. And again, this is for very specific use. This is for those situations where we have funding that requires an expedited timeline. This is the procurement process by which we would use to go out and get professional engineers on a very expedited timeline. So,
And this could either supplement the GEC, or this could be standalone as well. So it could be one or the other based on kind of what's required for the specific project. And there's a fairly wide discipline. So.
Absolutely. So what we're looking to do here is still utilize the two-step process. The first process is the pre-approval process. So essentially what we will do there is we will request firms to submit responses to the firm questionnaire, and in your backup you have that draft questionnaire, which honestly was taken essentially from the city of El Paso. They have a pre-approval process for their professional services, and we basically stole their questionnaire. I think it covers everything that we needed to. We've tweaked it in places that it needed it, but in essence it's their form, and it makes a lot of sense to use that. So we will solicit responses to the questionnaires. Those questionnaires then, the firms themselves will identify the disciplines within which they would like to be considered for future projects. So you'll see within the questionnaire the list of potential disciplines: architectural, civil, structural, traffic, and otherwise.
I think there's 12 disciplines, right?
Yes, sir. So the idea is they would check the box for, say, for example, geotechnical and civil engineering. So if I'm getting ahead of myself, actually. So this is the questionnaire that they would fill in, and they would provide back to the RMA. The RMA would evaluate all of those and essentially determine if the firm is pre-qualified by that discipline. So if someone submitted on civil and they have all of the necessary requirements to be pre-qualified for civil, then we would place them into the pre-qualified list for civil engineers. That's the first step. The second step would then be the RMA would identify a project with an expedited timeline, and we would identify all of the disciplines necessary for that project. So say, for example, that project needed civil engineers and geotechnical engineers. We would then go to our pre-approved list of civil and geotechnical engineers, and we would send them a very shortened request for proposals, in essence, and ask them if they're interested in pursuing this project, and they would submit proposals on that. We would have an expedited evaluation and selection process for that as well. And all of that is outlined here within the the memo that you all have as backup. I'm trying to hit the high points rather than read this to you verbatim.
And a firm could actually, they're only going to submit one time, but they could be pre-qualified in 4 or 5 or 6 different. So they could be geotech and civil and architectural and traffic. They could, several things that they could assist with. Is that correct?
They could, absolutely. Yes, sir.
I did like the fact as well that if there's any loss of key personnel, they're required to report that to us, and if there's any staff reduction of 20% or more. So basically, we maintain this list of pre-qualification, and that pre-qualification list is really open at any time. So anybody can come in after the fact, whether it be 6 months, a year from now, and basically apply to be on that particular list. Is that correct, Mr. Tez?
That's correct as well. It's open. So if they have changes, they can come in, and if they've added expertise, they could ask for pre-qualification and new discipline. They could remove their name from a pre-qualified list that they're already on. We also actually ask for updated applications each year so that we know that our pre-qualified list is up to date.
So basically what this is doing is this is another step that we've taken to increase the participation of some of the local engineering community and make sure that as projects seem to come in spades and as they seem to all have a heightened sense of urgency in record times of timelines and completion, we've got somebody that we can reach out to that's already pre-qualified and then begin looking at them handling certain pieces of particular projects, either in conjunction with the GEC or standalone on their own. So,
right, and that's a.
How is this being received?
I believe, and again, I would ask the local engineering firms to share their comments with you, but my understanding is that we are in agreement on this final version. Like I say, we've gone back and forth a few times and had some really actually very good open discussions about what they're seeking and what we're looking for. And I think we resulted in actually something that is useful to both of us, I think.
I see Mr. Gonzalez out out on the floor. Bobby, do you have any comments in regards to the selection process or any input?
First of all, good morning, everybody. And I'm here on behalf of really ACEC El Paso chapter. And I want to thank Raymond and the CRRMA for working with us on this document. And yes, we did have several meetings with Raymond, and we're in concurrence with the verbiage in the document. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for your input.
So subject to your questions, of course, I would request that these procedures be adopted and that you direct staff to incorporate these into our formal procurement policies and bylaws and anywhere else they need to be adopted into. So really, and really, I should have started the conversation with this. We're doing this a little bit out of order. What I'm doing here is asking for the approval that these processes be adopted by the board, and then we have to come back and actually formally incorporate them into our procurement documents. But I did it this way so that we could have this approved by you now so that I could begin to use this immediately and really start getting these pre-qualification lists started now.
So the motion is basically to approve the adoption of the expedited procurement process?
And direct staff to bring back revisions to procurement policies and other documents as necessary.
So,
I'll second that, subject to discussion. You can make a motion. You just made it.
is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Well, and just one question on this. On here, Raymond, we got, this is loud. We got specialties and so on. Where in the procurement process are we asking for their certifications? Or are we letting them self-certify that says, I'm Rafa Dame, so I'm a PE and I'm a blah, 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 blah.
The certifications that
Which I'm not.
Right. The certifications that I believe you're referring to are the TxDOT certifications. Regional mobility authorities, because of the nature of the majority of the work that we do, are either on or related to TxDOT facilities. So a number of TxDOT certifications are required. I believe that's what you're referring to.
Well, also industry, because in the IT industry, you have Cisco certifications, Microsoft certifications that say you're qualified to perform certain tasks. So I wonder if in this particular segment, does their industry impose standards upon them, like AIA for architects, PE professional engineers for? So where on this are we? I don't know if it matters or not. I'm just asking for my own edification.
I'm not.
See, what's to keep somebody to say that they're qualified to do something? I know we ask for past performance and history, but Does it matter?
I guess, and I apologize, but if I understand your question, I think you're asking whether or not we will verify the certifications presented, and the answer
Well,
to that
are
is
we asking
absolutely.
for any? I don't see you asking for any. You're asking for history, and you're asking for qualifications, which I assume are those the certifications by the industry, or by qualifications do you say experience?
I mean, I think Mr. Jacobs may have some input into this particular item.
Pete Jacobs, GEC. You have to be a professional engineer to be to do the civil engineering. You have to be a professional architect.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. See.
You have to do that to even be to even be qualified to start to get this. You can't own a company or be a certified company in the state of Texas that isn't a professional engineer or isn't a licensed architect or a licensed landscaper. They all have their certifications, and they have to provide that information.
So when we get the list of the key personnel, I assume that they will list their designations. I know most of the engineers have PE after their name, architects have AIA, whatever.
That's correct.
So that tells us that these people have, at least by industry standards, met some criteria that are qualified to perform.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I think I think I understand what you're asking. Really, the answer I think to that is rather than explicitly identify the list of qualifications that they ought to be providing to us, we leave it to them because it's their request to be pre-qualified. So if they have a qualification or some sort of a certification, it's incumbent upon them, and it makes sense for them to provide that to us.
Sure. That's fine.
Now, for the TxDOT certifications, it does specify exactly what you have to have. And part of our procurement process is you have to be certified by TxDOT. So they have those in there also.
Good. Okay.
Satisfied?
You bet. Yeah.
Good question. I believe we've had a motion. I believe we've had a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 10 is approved. Item 11, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute and submit documentation of eminent domain authority to the Texas Comptroller as required. And this basically, I believe, is just a procedural process that we need to go through in order to maintain our authority. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. The last legislative session included a bill, Senate Bill number 18, which it essentially overhauled the eminent domain procedures in the state of Texas. Included within that bill was a provision that said if an entity has the power of eminent domain, it must provide written notice to the state comptroller by December 31st of 2012 that it has that power and specifically identify the legislation that provides it with that power. So it's a form that was developed by the comptroller that you have included within your backup, and I've essentially filled everything out. I just haven't signed it yet. So what you have before you then is a board resolution notifying you of that and asking for authorization to actually sign and submit the notice to the comptroller.
Yeah, but for the record, we're not planning on using eminent domain, right?
We have never used it, and we do not plan on using it anytime soon.
It's one of the tools we do have available, though, and it is an important tool.
It is,
So
but-
obviously, you want to maintain that. Is this something we need to do on an ongoing basis in regards to this certification, or is this just one time?
My understanding is that it's a one-time deal.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 11 is approved. Item 12, discussion and action on a board resolution adopting the fiscal year 2013 CRRMA budget. Mr. Tejas.
Okay, what you have before you included in the backup is essentially what the RMA utilizes as its fiscal year budget, the projected cash flow statement, the unaudited version. This is what you have before you is for the fiscal year ending August 31st of 2013, which is referred to as fiscal year 13. I wanted to touch on the highlights of it, and you can certainly stop me or ask any questions for any detail that you're interested in knowing about. The increases that we have this year are in salary based upon the evaluation that I received last month. We have an increase in surety bond costs of $1,000 from last year. Also from last year, we have an increase in the PR outreach components of $15,000, and that increase is specifically related to the statutory requirement that we develop a strategic plan every 2 years. Last year, we only developed the annual report. This year, we're developing the annual report and the strategic plan. So you have an increase there. We also have the additional expense of CPA services on an ongoing basis, which, as you know, we've hired the local firm of Peña Briones, who is now helping us keep our books in line with the city of El Paso, and we have a monthly expense with them. So that is a new line item, in fact, of $10,000. And that's, of course, a not to exceed. And then finally, we have other consultants of $25,000. So that would include, by way of example, Terry Quesada, Ms. Quesada's firm, and any other consultants that we bring on in the coming fiscal year. So other than that, this is essentially the same form. And actually, I do want to mention something else that looks a little bit odd. When you look at estimated cash, really that's the starting point. And in the starting point for this coming year is $368,000. In the next section, you've got the total projected revenue. You'll see that I've noted there the Americas Interchange Build America Bond subsidy. If you go back and you recall with the Americas Interchange, we borrowed $30 million through the State Infrastructure Bank. We packaged that loan as a Build America bond, which then entitles us to a rebate on 35% of the interest paid each year. We agreed with the City of El Paso when we structured that deal that we would share that 35% rebate. Half of it would go to pay down the loan. The other half would come to the RMA as operating expenses. So what you see in the total projected revenue for that BAB subsidy in this fiscal year is $259,000. However, we received that payment early. So in truth, it actually should be identified within the estimated cash, but when you do that, it won't show up as projected revenue. So I've noted it here, and this was through working with the Peña Briones firm. I've noted it as projected revenue, even though it was a payment received early. So subject to your questions, this is your budget that I'm proposing for fiscal year 13.
We couldn't get the Finance Committee to meet, so this was not approved by them.
That's right, and normally we do that. We had a couple of a member that's out of town, and we just couldn't get a quorum together in advance of this meeting. I apologize for that.
I don't have any questions.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 12, the budget, fiscal year 2013 CRRMA budget is approved. Discussion and action on the Executive Director's Report. A, Loop 375 at I-10 America's Interchange Landscaping Plan. B, Zaragoza Direct Connector Project Quarterly Report. And C, City Council appointment of new board member, Mr. Ricardo Dominguez.
Board members, these items are updates, so there won't be any action requested on any of these. And in fact, actually, if I could start this with updating the item that we discussed earlier at the request of Mr. Adame, the procurement schedule for the Cesar Chavez project for the integrator. The RFP was released on August 1st. The written questions were due August 13th. We've been engaged in one-on-one meetings and additional proposal written questions. That period was extended through August 29th, which is, in other words, they're due today. And the proposal deadline is September 12th at 4 p.m. So we're looking to select a proposer on October 15th, and we're ultimately looking to execute an agreement and issue a notice to proceed on November 16th. So that's our schedule, all within 2012. So excuse that little sidetrack. So back to item number 13A, which is the Loop 375 at I-10 Americas Interchange Landscaping Plan. So as you'll recall, with the Americas Interchange project, the original project went out on the street with the request to develop the the 4 original direct connectors plus aesthetic improvements and related improvements at the interchange. The original bids that came in for that were high, so we had to go back and we removed one of the direct connectors. We also removed the majority of the landscaping and some of the aesthetic plans that were originally proposed for the interchange. So what we're doing now that the bids have come in and there are some excess funds available, we're now going back and developing a landscaping plan to implement on the interchange. And really what we're doing, as you know, the RMA's project will only result in the construction of 3 direct connectors. Now we are designing the rest of the project, but we're only going to construct the original 3 direct connectors. What we're doing in this landscaping plan is actually a plan for the entire interchange. So once we're done in January of 2013, we will walk away from the project, but we will present TxDOT with an actual landscaping plan. Now, of course, TxDOT needs to be involved in the development of this plan, and we've shared these concepts with them as well. And to date, they've shared a couple of comments, but I think overall they are supportive of the concepts. So this item, and included in the backup as 13A, show you 3 separate concepts that our consultants have developed. And actually, I'll ask IT to bring those up on the monitor, and I think you should be able to pull them up on that second screen as well. So this first item, this first slide that you see is essentially an aerial of concept number 1. What you see here, the numbers on the side tie to the proposed improvements within the interchange. This one is unique in that within the clover leaves you see these gray blocks. Those gray blocks really are gabion cages filled with rocks, as you can see in item number 2 to the side. It's a really unique concept, and you can see it a little better on the next slide. But as you'll see before we go to the next slide, actually, sorry, IT, you'll see that this landscaping concept includes a number of trees and shrubs and stones, smaller trees and grasses, and the use of boulders as well, I think is a unique concept. So if we can go to the actual view from the side, you'll see how this would look. So the gabion cages are identified there in the concept. And you can see the rocks in the front as well as the boulders. I should mention that the interchange that you see is actually the Americas interchange. We've used our engineers, one of the general engineering consultants, sub-consultants, the Jacobs team, to actually develop this for us. So they're using the actual design proposed for the project for these concepts. So that's the actual interchange. If we could go to the next slide, then you can see an aerial that identifies concept number 2. In this one, you'll see randomly placed rocks within the clover leaves. You'll see a number of grasses and shrubs and boulders as well, and wall sculptures. This one is unique. If you look in box number 1, that is actually a photograph from one of the interchanges in Albuquerque, and they use these wall sculptures that really protrude from the ground, and they're lit up at night. So you see something along those lines, and you see it curved down within the clover leaves in this concept. If we go to the next slide, you can see what it would look like, and those are the proposed wall sculptures that are identified in the aerial. So you see a lot more grasses in this one. You'll see randomly placed borders within the clover leaves as well. That's concept number 2. Concept number 3 then uses these mounds with shrubs and grasses of various sizes. So to get a concept of this, actually, if we go to the next slide, you can get a better feel for what it looks like. So you'd have these raised mounds with grasses or shrubs placed on them as well, with rocks around them as well. So that's the third concept. So really, what we're doing today is really sharing with you the original 3 concepts that were developed by our consultants. The next step is actually sharing these concepts with the MPO and soliciting comments from them as well. The MPO had actually requested this some time ago, and we've finally gotten to a stage where we can actually show them something. So we're going to request that we be placed on their September meeting, which is the first Friday of September. So that's coming up. We're going to ask them for comments. We'll also likely place these concepts on our website and ask the public for comments as well. So subject to your questions, that's really more of an update than anything else. And of course, please provide me with your comments either now, or you can send an email on what concepts you liked, what concepts you didn't like. If there's something from concept number 2 you'd like to see roll into concept number 3, we're open to all of those suggestions.
Really spectacular. When we discussed this a little earlier, how much of this, the first 3 direct connectors are scheduled to be substantial completion in January. How much of this can be done once those first 3 are done? Can we do one of the quadrants, Mr. Tejas? Well,
and that's one of the outstanding questions. Really, when you look at the direct connectors that are going to be completed, the actual direct connectors that will be open could allow for a completion of this work in the northwest quadrant. The problem, though, is that there will still be some work remaining, which essentially amounts to moving the frontage road a little bit further outside of the direct connector columns. So there will be some work that'll need to get done, but that is the first quadrant that we could focus on. And I should mention too, there could be, as we get closer to the project closeout, there could be a way that we could actually complete the frontage road work that's necessary, which could actually leave that entire quadrant complete and ready for this already. So I would say if any of them would be ready, it would be the northwest quadrant. And in fact, actually, we've talked to the consultants. They said we could do a good amount of this work in the northwest quadrant and even leave it available for completion of the frontage road work.
And maintenance and ongoing maintenance was a big concern, so all of these were kind of designed around kind of a low water usage, low amount of maintenance, and I think they did a terrific job. I think all three are great combination of colors and textures, and so really some nice options. It'll really, when the final design, final configuration is done, it'll really be something to be proud of.
I agree.
Any questions?
Where is the statue paying homage to Mr. McLaughlin going to be placed? We talked about various, or is it a bust or is it a full-size statue?
Full size, of course.
Is it?
I placed one of the rocks with my name on it, that's it, so just a small rock.
I didn't see it, so I just want to make sure we're clear, because he was very sensitive about
Thank you, Ralph.
My pleasure. No question.
I'm going to keep moving to item number 13B. 13B deals with the Zaragoza Direct Connector project. As you know, on that project, Texas Department of Transportation has designed and is actually managing the construction of that project. For that project, however, we are providing up to $20 million in transportation reinvestment funds for the completion of that project. As part of that, we retained a responsibility to oversee the project in terms of the expenditure of those TRZ funds. So what you see as item 13B in your backup is the first quarterly progress report that our general engineering consultant has developed. And this is in coordination with TxDOT. So really what you see is everything that has happened through this date on that project. It's a nice, hopefully easily digestible quarterly report on what has happened to date. It breaks down everything from the funding to the actual construction. This quarterly report will actually be provided to the city, obviously quarterly, and so that they know exactly how their funds are being spent. So this is...
I was out there this weekend. There's a lot of progress going on out there.
Absolutely, there is.
And we're looking at a November 2013 completion, correct?
That is correct. So this is also an update for you. We'll continue to provide these updates to you periodically, as well as the city of El Paso.
Who else is this going to besides the city? Are these going on the webpage, or are these going to any other entity besides the city?
It'll go to our webpage, and actually I may mention it at the September Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting and see if any of those folks are interested in receiving copies as well. So that leaves item 13C, which Mr. McLaughlin mentioned. The city of El Paso, through its council meeting yesterday, actually appointed a new board member to replace Dr. Bayan. The new board member is Ricardo Dominguez, who was a longtime employee of the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization. So I look forward to him bringing his expertise to this board. So up to your questions, that's all I have for you today.
And we're looking at Mr. Dominguez getting all the necessary documentation and potentially being available for our very next board meeting, which is in 2 weeks.
Yes, sir. 2 weeks.
So hopefully Mr. Dominguez is here to join us, and we've got not so many issues with quorum that we've addressed here during the course of the summer. So with that, any other questions for Mr. Tejas?
None.
Full agenda. We got through it quickly. Good job. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned on August 29th, 2012 at 9:58 a.m. 10 o'clock by the clock behind me. So
Yep. Good job.
have a great day.